Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head Podcast. My name is Paul and today I'm joined by the lovely Kathy. Hi Kathy, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Paul?
I am very good. Now, before we kicked off, we were talking about something and there's this really old saying. What is it? Horses sweat, men perspire and women glow. Now, the reason I'm talking about that is that in the UK, we're having a bit of a mini heat wave. So I'm perspiring, sweating and glowing all at the same time because it's warm. And I like warm, but I need to have a pool or the sea adjacent to me. But when you're recording a podcast, that's not really practical. But hey ho, so if you see me kind of like panting, I'm not a dog, it's just that things are getting a bit warm. How's life treating you, Kathy?
It's good. I have just moved to Virginia. I'm originally from Seattle. Then I lived in Dallas, Texas area for about 30 years. And then I was in New Orleans for a short time. And now I'm in Virginia. I've only been here for about 4 months. And it's absolutely beautiful here.
Right. So for those of us that don't know the United States layout that well, would I be right in thinking Washington, D.C. and Washington State is kind of East Coast?
Washington State is West Coast.
Oh, so West Coast.
Farthest, yes, by West. Canada and Alaska.
All right. Okay.
So this direction for y'all.
That way. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Texas right in the center. And then now Virginia is, I'm 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. So now I'm on the East Coast.
Oh, right. Okay. Gotcha. I know where I am. I was getting my East and West mixed up.
Yes.
So you've certainly moved around the States quite a bit over the years.
I have. That's, trusting your intuition and going in different directions when it's time to do something new.
It's really interesting because you said you kind of like north of you are the Shenandoah Mountains. And I said that there was a movie from years back, a Western movie about that area. And there was a song as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of it, but I think when I was in choirs in high school or in church even, I think we talked about sang about the Shenandoah River and the valleys and all that. So I'm sure somebody who watches this will go, oh yes, I know that song.
Yeah, let me know what it is because it brings back memories. And because I was a big Western movie fan as a kid because that was the kind of thing that was on TV all the time. World War II movies in black and white, Westerns, and that was pretty much it. And okay, gangster movies as well. So in the United States, my perception of the United States when I was a child was it was full of cowboys chasing Indians, and that's what they called it in those days. Every city was full of mobsters and gangsters, and World War II had only just finished. So.
Yeah. There's a lot more to it for sure. But yes.
Yeah, I know now. Yeah, absolutely. But as a child, your perceptions are kind of shaped by the stuff you see on TV. And that was a kind of the picture of the States that was floating around my mind when I was a youngster.
It's interesting. I totally get it, right? We're limited on what we know by what we watch or by what people tell us. And then when we're able to actually go into other countries and visit other places, then we're like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting. And it's actually, most of the times it's actually very beautiful. But it is funny how our childhood experiences really, do form who we are.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, up until the age of about 7 or 8, we are living in our subconscious mind. The rational brain hasn't developed yet. So we're just these massive sponges uptaking all the information and the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent that we're surrounded by, from our parents and extended family and from schools and colleagues and school friends and teachers. And we're just absorbing it all. And that's kind of a good thing, but also a bad thing, because if you've got an alcoholic or a drug addict or a racist person in the family, then you absorb all of that kind of negative stuff. So, and TV, when I was a child, has an awful lot of influence because when I was a kid, that was how you occupied children. If the weather was bad outside and you couldn't throw them out, you'd plonk them in front of the TV.
Yeah.
And you just absorb all that stuff.
Yeah. It's so interesting we're even talking about this in the context of television, because earlier this morning I was thinking about how we truly are whatever we're taught. And yet now what I've been going through in my life, especially in the last 20 years, is uncovering everything that everybody's put on top of me. And now I'm getting to the core of who I really am and finding that self-love. And really now I'm able to be here and do what I came here to do instead of what others thought I should do or others thought I should be. And that has a lot to do with what was going on around me when I was growing up. And like we talked about, the subconscious that's coming in and telling us things that really aren't who we are.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it's interesting. If you're lucky, you kind of pick up the idea that we've had all this stuff injected into us, all this kind of good, bad, indifferent, and layers and layers and layers. And you, if you're lucky, you get to understand that, and you start, like you said, you start
Yeah.
to peel away all that stuff, and eventually you kind
Yeah.
of see who you really are and get to do what you want to do. If you're unlucky, you don't recognize these facts, and you're kind of stuck throughout your entire life being pulled by all this stuff that influenced you from the day you were born up until the present moment.
And I think that's what creates victims and that victimness. And when we're able to finally take on that role of being fully responsible for our lives and going, okay, now I want to work on those subconscious things that are going on that are really running my tapes that aren't serving me anymore. So being able to get rid of those subconscious beliefs and replace them with that, again, who you really are and who you came here to be. And that's one of the things I love about coaching. We were just, before we got on, we were talking about coaching, and I'm a spiritual coach. And what I love about coaching is watching people asking certain questions and watching people peel their own onion, which of course creates tears, but peeling their own onion and really discovering who they are. It's so fun to watch somebody all of a sudden go, oh, no wonder I believed what I believed, but it doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the best things about the work that I do, is working with a client and seeing that look in their eye when they realize in that instant that all that stuff they've been dealing with is actually just nothing. It's just thoughts, it's just stories that they've been made up, or they've inherited throughout their entire life. And they understand in that instant that they don't have to listen to those stories anymore. They don't have to carry that baggage anymore. They can just let it go in an instant. And that is why I do what I do, because I just love that moment.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when the Gulf War started, and I had small children and I have boys. And I remembered thinking that there has to be another mother over in Iraq and Iran who does not want to send her sons to war. And that's all I could think of. And I thought, if I feel that way, then somebody over there has to feel that way. And that was a game changer for me on how I viewed other nations and countries and my next door neighbor, because I realized we're only doing what we're taught. And you talked about it. People learn to hate because they watch their parents hate, or they watch the news talk about hate. And I think about how, if I can see somebody in another country that we're in war with, as they don't want to send their children to war, then how different are we really? We're not that different.
I completely agree with you. I don't think we are different at all. We have different beliefs, and we're kind of, our subconscious minds are built up differently because of what's going on around us as we're growing. But, you cut my arm, I cut your arm, I cut somebody's arm in Afghanistan or Iraq or in Russia or China, the blood
Right.
comes out red.
Yes.
When you
Yes.
peel away the skin, and they've got sinews and muscles and tissue and whatever else is in there, we are the same. And that's what I find really sad or strange sometimes, is that we live on this tiny, tiny, tiny little rock in the middle
Yeah.
of the back lot of the galaxy. Yeah,
Mhm.
not even prime real estate in the galaxy, this little back corner of the galaxy. And here we are, ants on an anthill, fighting over where a line is drawn, or who has access to what resources or whatever. And it's,
Right.
it's like, when you think about it, it's both tragic, laughable, and ridiculous all in one go, because we inhabit the same tiny little rock, the same tiny little space, and we're fighting over it like ants on an anthill.
Well, and over here in America, we're having the experience of political stuff tearing us apart, tearing families apart. And it's like, wait a minute. I've never understood that, because I'm sitting there thinking, your political person's not going to come take care of you when you're sick, but your family member will. But if you aren't talking with them because of something that the political parties are saying, then what are we really doing? Because that isn't who we really are. Like you said, when we cut and bleed, we all bleed the same color. And I think in the end, all we really want is to be loved and cherished and respected and validated, and yet we have a hard time doing it for others. I think mostly because we have a hard time doing it for ourselves.
Yeah, I completely agree, Kath. I think that's why this phrase, self-care and self-love is starting to come to the forefront, because
Yeah.
we don't do it enough. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't really take care of us. I know a lot of people have martyr syndrome, where they give of themselves to
Yeah.
everybody and everything. And, they kind of end up like a crushed Hulk after a few years, because they've got nothing left. They haven't
Right.
taken care of themselves.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big one. I was a flight attendant in a former life. I've been many different things. And one of them was, we talked about put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then on your child. And there truly was a scientific reason. We watched a video, and after like 7 seconds, the person, she couldn't put her lipstick on normally. She was like all over her face, because the hypoxia, it set in. And it's the same with self-care. And when we take care of our families, if we don't take care of ourselves first, then we don't have anything to give to our families and to our world around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most important things is, in relation to that, is be careful of where we take information in from, because we were talking about, TV, and TV playing a big part in our lives when we were kids. I now don't watch TV. I don't watch the news. I allow myself, I mean, we've all got one of these things. So I allow myself, a couple of minutes a day, literally 2 minutes every day, to check on the headlines. And then that's it. Because unfortunately, the news is always bad. Somebody's died, somebody's been attacked, taxes in some
Yep.
descriptions have increased, there's a war going on somewhere, and there's something else going on that we're not happy with. Yeah. There's
Right.
never really, really good news. And for somebody who kind of like gets up very early in the morning and goes to bed really late at night and maybe drives to work, they're hearing this same cycle over and over and over again. And then they get in front of a TV, and then they're actually watching the same cycle. And it's just like negativity, negativity, negativity. And you kind of being bombarded. Like if you go out in the sun, you get bombarded by all the rays, you get all the vitamin D3. But with the news and TV and radio and the internet, you get bombarded with all this negative stuff. And it's easy to understand why people start to worry and become fearful and hate and all the other stuff, because it's there 24/7.
Yeah, I'm noticing it with people I know when they watch certain news channels constantly. It's on all the time. I'm watching their anger, like they're angry and angry about things. And I'm like, but is that bringing you peace? I mean, I believe anger and hatred is from, I hate to say the dark side, but it's from something that is not really, it's not positive, it's not light, it's not love. And when I think of where we really want to be, and how I believe how we really want to be and how we want to act is in a loving space. But we can't do that, if you're right, if we are bombarded like all the time with news and I with negativity. And you're right, what the news wants to sensationalize everything. That's how they get ratings, and people listen to it, right? People watch it, they want to know what's going on.
Yeah, it's bizarre how we're made up, because for some strange reason, we seem to want to hear bad news. We seem to want to watch other people suffering. It's almost like, kind of, what's that phrase? Therefore, but for the grace of God go I, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
like, oh, they're suffering, which is great because that means I'm not suffering. But what an existence, what a way to kind of go through life, to be permanently afraid and hate. Anger, I understand. Anger has its place. Anger
Yeah.
is useful. But what I've never understood is hatred, because hatred has no benefit whatsoever. At least if you're angry, you've got to defend yourself. That can kind of stress you up in the right kind of way and get you in a position where you can defend yourself. But things like hatred and envy and jealousy, They don't do anything. There's no
Right.
positive side that I can think of. There's no positive side to either of those.
Right. I think about you're really bringing up some really great things, because I'm sitting there thinking about how, as humans, we're all, and as children, right? We are taught to, little boys are taught to not cry, little girls are taught different things. And so what happens is we don't learn how to deal with our feelings. And so, of course, we would be angry if we're not allowed to show anger. And of course, we would hate if we're not allowed to, again, show anger or show. There's so many other words besides anger we can use as well, right? Frustrated. Um, I don't know, that there's a plethora of words that we could use. And yet we don't allow ourselves that moment to really feel whatever it is we're feeling. I know that is something that I've been learning is I have a list of words in my closet actually, and I'll go to them and I'll go, okay, what am I really feeling today? And I look at the words and I'm able to really pinpoint that feeling of, I feel lost or I feel frustrated instead of just angry. And so I think that when we're able to really understand what we are feeling, then we're able to move through it. But we have to feel those feelings, otherwise, we just bury them.
I think that's a really, really important point, Kathy, that we, especially, well, from my perspective as a guy, we've always been taught that you don't express your emotions,
Right.
apart from, say, laughter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, grief, frustration, all the kind of, all the full range of emotions, we're not allowed to express them. We kind of like, we've got to say, stay flatlined. And the
Yeah.
challenge with that is that if you're not allowed to express your emotions, they get bottled up. And then what was a slight annoyance becomes a big annoyance. It becomes, starts to kind of boil the pot over and over and over and over and over until you actually get to a state where I'm guessing, hatred stems through because you weren't allowed to express that little bit of annoyance when it first came out. And we're not able to kind of go through, especially in the West. I mean, there are some parts of the world where people do share their emotions. They wear their heart on their sleeves, and you can see that, especially when there's been a tragedy. Unfortunately, you see people wailing and crying, and all of the emotions are coming out.
Yes.
Whereas over in the West, principally, you don't see that. It's very
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you even talk about it bubbling up, because I'm seeing that happen right now everywhere, right? Lots of things are bubbling up because I think we've pushed everything so far under the carpet, or I've seen pictures where you put those big balls underneath water and you can only hold them under the water so long before they pop up. And that's kind of what's happening, I think, I see it in America, but it may be happening all over the world as well, where all of a sudden we have just suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And it's like, wait a minute, now we're ready to do it differently. I think a lot of kids right now that are coming in are here to usher in a different way of doing it, unlike the way I've done it or my parents did it or the parents before them have done it. And we're changing how we're doing it. And I really love it. I work with younger kids like in their 20s, and I love that age because I really think they're here to usher in a whole new way of doing life.
I certainly hope so, because the old way kind of worked for a while, but
Yeah.
it's like everything, isn't it? You have to push through, you have to develop, you have to grow. And as a species, because that's what we are, we're mammals, as a species, we have to develop and have to grow. And it's almost kind of like, I'm not going to use the word responsibility, but it's almost like down to the young people to come through and to show that there is a different way of doing things. Now, having just said that, it's really interesting because we've just been talking about how we're influenced as children.
Yeah.
So it must take a hell of a challenge to break out of that, and to say you're working with young people to actually break out of that molding and to see things differently.
Yeah, well, I think those kids come in already seeing it differently. And again, then we start piling onto them what we think they should do. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about different cultures and arranged marriages, and how can they tell people who they should marry? And I said, wait a minute. You do realize we do that with our children when we tell them what college they should go to and what career they should have and who they, we may not be doing it in the marriage way, but we're certainly doing it in other ways that we don't even realize we're doing.
I'm guessing, I mean, okay, we don't have arranged marriages like in some countries, but we do to a certain extent because I mean, as a young man, I can experience this. A girl takes you home to meet the parents, and the
Yeah,
parents either approve of you or they disapprove of you. And
right.
that's like, no, 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 he's no good for you. Off he goes, kind of thing. So, yeah, it's not an arranged marriage as such, but it's like rejects, rejects, rejects. Oh, he's got a nice job. Oh, he wears a
Yeah,
tie. Yes, he's nice. Yeah, go for
he's
him.
presentable. Absolutely. I mean, we do it in such subtle ways. We don't even realize that we're doing it. But I do think that these kids that are coming in, I think they're here to usher in a lot more love and a lot more acceptance. I mean, we're seeing it in how they even date and who they hang out with. I'm noticing that with my children and their friends, that they are very all inclusive instead of, no, we got to stick to our group and our, whoever we think is appropriate for us to hang out with in our own suburb or our own city or whatever. So it is very interesting to watch. Now, I think what gets in the way sometimes is parents get in the way of their children becoming who they came here to be. And so instead of there's a parenting coach out there, and I can't remember her name right now because my kids were already grown by the time she came up, but she talks about that, how we're here actually as parents to learn from our children instead of us to teach our children. I think that's a really interesting idea because when children come in, they're all about love. I mean, you watch them and when they fall, they cry if they want to cry, but sometimes they just get up and keep walking. But as adults, we don't do that. We like stop and we like stew over, oh my gosh, I just fell. Oh no, I don't want anyone to see me fall. I get, scared about that. But children, they just go, they just do. They don't worry about what other people are thinking of them until they get into school. And then it's a whole new ballgame.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. It's like imagination and creativity. I was talking about this the other day with a client of mine, how a child is presented with a clean wall. If they're in the right kind of mood, they'll find something and they will draw a spaceship, an entire Star Wars battle, or monsters and all kinds of things. And to you, it might look like a lot of squiggles, but to the child, that is, a Dali or a Picasso. It represents an entire story. And, you see a kid running around wearing a little box on their head and carrying a wooden spoon, and they're having this imaginary battle with aliens or with whatever, and to them it's real. It's like the imaginary friends that some kids have, to
Yeah.
them that imaginary invisible friend that we the parent can't see is incredibly real to that child. But as we get older, that creativity, that ability to use our imagination gets, like you're saying, gets squished down. And school is really bad for that because you don't want to be seen as being the odd one out. You want to kind of, even at a very early age, you want to start to fit in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you even talk about imaginary friends because I'm going to go way out there. And how do we know it's an imaginary friend?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we
I
don't
mean,
know.
how do we know it's not a spirit, somebody on the other side that they can see and they're having an experience with? Now, of course, that's way out there for some people, but I'm starting to wonder about that now.
No, the reason I used imaginary friend is us as adults can't see. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
why I use the phrase imaginary friend, because as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned, it is an imaginary friend. But yeah, who knows? It could be something that the child is seeing that we can't see. And it's only because no, 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 you shouldn't be talking to imaginary friends because that's not right. And there's nobody actually there. And you're going to end up looping, end up in a hospital. And so we kind of suppress it. And there's no wonder that most children very, very quickly learn to either not mention their imaginary friend or to actually not see it anymore.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because that's a gift they have. Like that is a gift that they come into this world. Again, that's where as parents, we start kind of suppressing our children's God given gifts. Now, I say God, you can say source, universe, energy, whatever it is. I've kind of worked through a lot of that for me, but I think that we suppress whatever that gift is that they were given instead of really embracing that and kind of asking them more about it. And where did that come from? And what is it you're seeing? And what experiences have you had before you even came here? Because I've heard from the ages of 2 and 6, you can ask children, like, what experience did they have before they came here? And the children will talk about it. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that we have as adults is we want our children to grow up to be normal. I'm using air
Yeah,
quotes there, because that phrase means it has a lot of connotations, but we want our kids to be standard as they kind of come out of the box and so they're the same as all the other kids kind of thing. I mean, I was reading about Richard Branson, who's in the news at the moment because he allegedly went into space, whether you want to go down that road or not. But as a child, he was a child of two extraordinary parents. The mum particularly would say to him, right, okay, we're dropping you here in the middle of nowhere. There's your bicycle. We will be 20 miles down the road. We'll meet you for lunch. Yeah. And
wow,
he would have to find his own way.
yeah,
And they would, take him out canoeing and take him around the world on trips, exploring, lots of really, really interesting, fun, unusual things for Richard and his siblings when they were young kids. Yeah. And so there's no wonder that he grew to be an extraordinary person, because he had extraordinary parents who pushed their children to be different, to see the world differently, to see opportunities, to go looking for adventure, to go and do things. Whereas most of us, myself included as parents, we kind of go, no, 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 no. Here's the box, child. I want you to fit in that box. Square peg, square hole, off you go.
right. Which is interesting because as adults, we don't want to live like that anymore. And yet we are subjecting our children to that. I didn't know that about Richard Branson, and how fascinating. How fascinating is that? Because what a difference your life is when you are surrounded by love and loving parents, and parents who tell you you can do anything. And I trust that you can do anything, compared to parents who are like, oh, you better not do that. Oh, I'm scared, so I'm going to make you scared, and I worry, so I'm going to make you worry. And what do you mean you didn't bring home an A? But the only way you're going to be successful is if you go to college and you get your master's and you do da 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 da. When it's like, we're noticing now that you don't have to always go to college and get your master's and become in order to become successful. And what is success anyway?
Very good question. Yeah, success is, to me, it's what we define for ourselves. I mean, what's the word I'm going to say? The society has definitions of sex, which usually means lots and lots of money,
Yep.
prestigious job, and the ideal family, 2.2 children, the perfect wife or the perfect husband or whatever, a nice house, and all that kind of stuff. That's what society dictates to us. But we should dictate to ourselves what success is.
Right.
How that looks to us, what we want. I think too many people are chasing other people's dreams. I find that with my clients. I want to be a 6-figure entrepreneur. Okay, great. Why? Um, hmm. And they can't give you an answer because at the moment it's, I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a 6-figure entrepreneur, or I want to be a millionaire. No. I want to be a billionaire. Well, okay, great. Why? And the thing that makes me smile is the very people that are saying, I want to be a millionaire or a billionaire, are criticizing people like Richard Branson for
Mm-hmm.
doing what they're doing. It's an interesting paradox.
Yeah.
And talking about college and master's degrees, I think it's really interesting that a lot of the most successful people that we know of either didn't go to college, or they
Yep.
dropped out of college, or they left school at 16 or 17.
Right.
Like Richard Branson, I think he didn't graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
Zuckerberg dropped out of wherever it was he dropped out of.
Yep.
I don't know if Jeff Bezos went to university. So all these
Bill
big
Gates.
names. But yeah, Big Gates again. He dropped out, didn't he?
The iPhone guy. I'm trying to think of who's passed. Steve Jobs
Yeah.
didn't go. Well, and I think it's interesting. I love what you're talking about too, where we are trying to fit into that box, right? We're trying to be that millionaire, but we don't want to do what billionaires and millionaires do, which is they make mistakes. and they push through it. Whereas sometimes if we go up against a wall and it's a mistake, again, oh, how are people viewing us and how do people see us? And then we won't go past that anymore. And then we'll stay within our little box. I think, again, a lot of that has to do with how you see yourself, the love you have for yourself, and the love that you got or didn't get as a child growing up, and those experiences that you have.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has got to do with, how can I put it, the ability to lose face. In the fact that, if you make a mistake, if you fall over, you go, oh well, look, I just fell over, I screwed up there, but I'm still around and I'm going to carry on and move forward. Whereas a lot of people, it's, ooh, you said earlier on, I fell over. I hope nobody was watching me fall over there, because they might laugh at me. It might put me on one of those prank shows, Well, so what? You fell over, you got up, and you moved again. And all these people who are or have been mega successful, they've made mistake after mistake after mistake.
Yeah.
But that's what they were prepared to do, and that's what they understood in order to get where they wanted to be.
Right. They have, when we talk about it in the coaching industry, they had a big enough why. They have a big enough why as to what the reason they're doing whatever they're doing. And if you don't have a big enough why, then of course you're going to flounder. And if you don't know who you are, of course you're going to flounder, because you have all these other voices in your head telling you what you should do, how to stay safe in the box. Instead of, once you get rid of those other voices, then you're able to listen and trust your intuition that is really guiding. I talk about it being your GPS system, your God provided system that I believe is specific for Paul. And I have a specific one for me, and it's guiding me into where I need to go. But if I'm listening to your GPS system, it's not, of course, why wouldn't I be confused? Because I'm listening to your GPS system instead of my own.
I like that GPS system. I mean, it's so true. It's like, let me give you, because you're in Virginia. So it's like setting your GPS to go to Washington, D.C., and then driving towards Ontario, ignoring everything. Why set, you said the GPS is the way you want it to go is over there, but you're following because somebody said, no, you've got to go to Ontario. So you're going that way, completely opposite direction to where you actually wanted to go. But because you're listening to everybody else, and we're allowing ourselves to be influenced by everybody else, we just go off track. It's sometimes in completely the opposite direction to where we want to go in the first place. And I understand why, because we are easily influenced. We have been since, we'll talk, as soon as we go to school, we start being influenced by others because we want to fit in. We talk about this box again. We want to fit in. We want to be part of the in crowd. We want to be part of the cool kids. And the cool kids all wear blue jeans with a hole in on the right thigh. And they wear a black hat tilted to one side, and they all want to go to this college. So, of course, we want to fit in. We don't want to be outside the box, which is ironic. It's ironic because we talk about thinking outside the box, but everybody wants to stay inside the box, and it's
well, it's funny because we feel like we're safe if we're inside the box, and yet for those of us who always felt different, we're not safe inside the box. We're actually safer outside of the box. And like in my situation, look, I can't say I need it because I can't go back, but being that I felt different, feeling safe at home, that's one of the things I like to tell parents is create a really safe place for children to come home to, because when they go out into the world, especially they go to school and they have to wear those certain jeans that have the hole in it, and that doesn't fit who they are. They need to come home and be able to be themselves and really feel loved and safe and secure at home, because that's their home base. And if their parents are there, not telling them, well, just don't listen to other people, because that doesn't help them either, but really listen to them. Okay, like you're saying, why do you want to be a millionaire? Well, why do you want to fit in with the crowd? Why do you want to wear those jeans? Like getting our children to understand what it is that's driving them to be like that, I think would really, it could make such a huge difference in our world, especially for our children growing up. And, that's what I believe.
I think that the challenge is that although society has evolved enormously in the past few thousand years, we as human beings haven't, because if you go back to days when we were living in caves, you had to be part of that society, because if you didn't go out as part of the gang, you'd be targeted by predators because you'd be on your own, and there'd just be one spear instead of 20 spears to fight against saber-tooth tigers or lions or whatever. So we were kind of brought up to understand that we had to be part of the crowd, we had to be part of a band for self-preservation.
Yes.
And the thing is, that is still inherent in us. I mean, we've got fight, flight, or flight or freeze responses. Yep. That's from the days when we had predators, when there were lions and tigers and wolves behind every single bush. And our brains kind of respond. Now, if the boss, shouts at us, or if somebody shouts at us across the street or beeps the horn in the car, we have those same responses, just as if there was a saber-toothed tiger. And I think one thing for us as human beings is we need to kind of evolve away from those responses. And that's going to take a hell of a long while, because, we've only been on this planet, 100,000 years as humans, thereabouts?
Yeah.
And, we haven't really evolved that much since then, because we still have those same innate inbuilt responses. I mean, when a baby's born, a baby only has two fears. And you think about it, it's quite logical. The first one is the fear of falling over, because babies and very, very young children are incredibly fragile. And again, loud noises, because loud noises can affect our hearing, and they make us startle and jump and make us fall over. They don't have any other fears. There's no phobias about, dogs barking or whatever. Just those two things. So it means that every other fear, every other thing we are scared of or wary of is given to us by the world around us as we're growing.
Yes, yes. And when I think about, even because you've got my mind racing, thinking about being afraid of loud noises and the falling, and I think about how wherever we are before here with our souls, it was probably very peaceful. And then we come here. I mean, I always think about when babies cry when they come out. I'm like, they're probably going, crap, I'm back. Instead of where they were, where it was so peaceful and loving and calm and
Yeah, I mean, we are born into a very, very noisy environment, and given that our hearing is so sensitive, is there any surprise that most babies are born crying because of all the noise that's around us? And even if we kind of make the birth a very quiet, very peaceful, very spiritual kind of experience, very, very quickly we kind of move out of that into the standard world of traffic and car noise and phones going off and everything else.
Chaos.
Yeah.
Yes.
Noise.
Noise. I know. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I love all the discussions about, I always wonder like who it's best to work with, because as a spiritual coach, because I'm like, where can I help the most, and who can I help the most of uncover who they are? Because I'm not telling them who to be, but we're uncovering, just as you do, right? As a mindset coach, is you're basically uncovering all those old beliefs and putting in new ones. And I sit there and I go, okay, is it best to work with young kids so that you help them, or teenagers, or 20 somethings, or adults? Because our children can't change until really the adults change, and we all decide to break those cycles. We have to break the cycles of, like, the cycle in my family was worry and anxiety. So I did it, and then I taught my children to do it. And when I saw my children do it, I thought, oh, no, we got to break that, because I don't want them to then pass it on down to theirs. So I think it's interesting you talk about the fight, flight, or freeze. So not only are we carrying that down, but then now we're grabbing onto other things. As we're all going down, we're grabbing onto other things to add to what our children have to kind of undo, in a sense.
Bizarre question, kind of. What's the difference between a life coach, transformational coach, and a spiritual coach? Where does the spiritual side come in with your coaching?
Well, I think for me, the spiritual coaching has more to do with really getting into the interior of who they are, spiritually, really, like what is their true purpose for being here. Now again, that's very similar to life coaching, where we're trying to get down into, we're asking certain questions, but I really think I'm trying to get to the core of who they really are spiritually. And again, back to that GPS system. Okay, let's get you to start listening and trusting your intuition, instead of, because I could tell you what to do all day long, but I'm going to tell you from my view and my GPS system. But if you and I talk about and get to the core of who you are, get rid of those old beliefs, and look at that, and start trusting your intuition, then you are going to be coming from it from a spiritual view, instead of from just, again, where life says, well, you got to make $1 million, or you have to be this certain weight, or you have to have hair that looks like this, or you better make sure that that selfie looks just right. So if that's not who the core of who you are, so I think as a spiritual coach, I'm really getting to the core of who somebody is. And then I think I'm able to bring in, I have other gifts that are, I'm an empath, so I can feel certain things. I get certain pictures of, I kind of can see things that kind of come together. So we kind of discuss that in our, when I'm coaching somebody as well.
So who is your kind of ideal client, Kathy?
Oh gosh, my ideal client is anybody who's on a spiritual journey. And sorry, I have a dog who's coming to say hello. So anybody who's on a spiritual journey and realizes that they're here for something greater than they have either been taught, or their family has allowed, or society has allowed. So I'm really, my ideal client is somebody who's on that spiritual journey. They're already into that, and yet they are ready to take it to a deeper level and really start to really love themselves and honor themselves, and trust that intuition. So I have a couple clients right now who are absolutely my ideal clients. And really, those two are the two I'm thinking of, are in their 20s, and they're 20-year-old women, because I think when people know who they are and when they love themselves, they will make better choices.
So where can people reach out to us if they want to talk to you, Kathy?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Kathy Walden Spiritual Coach, and on Facebook as well, Kathy Walden Spiritual Coach. And then I am getting my YouTube up with a bunch of videos. I do videos with another friend of mine called Trusting the Universe. And we discuss things about how we can trust the universe, and how we're moving, and whether it's in relationships, or whether it's in fear or in courage. And so that's on my YouTube channel, and that's just Kathy Walden.
Okay, so I'll put the links in the show notes. Listen, Kathy, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for this. Any final thoughts, any sort of final words before we finish?
Well, I have loved our conversation. Thank you so much for having me. I think my final thoughts are, learn to love yourself. A lot of times we think we have to love others first and then love ourselves, but I think it's the opposite. I think when we truly love ourselves, then the love for others just comes so naturally. And I think once you really love yourself, you will be able to listen to your intuition and really start doing what you came here to do.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kathy. And guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Happy Head podcast. Bye now.